So I finally got Bryan Wolfmueller back on the line for some more revelation, and this wasn't his fault. This was my fault. I explained that a little bit in the show, but what I didn't do well was prepare to bring you back up to speed on what we'd covered last when we were talking eschatology in this Wolfschatology, eschatology series. And so it's been quite a while since we've done this. Where we are is in what, if we ever publish this as text, will be Volume 3, Antichrist, Antichrist, Who's Got the Antichrist? And we've been trying to understand the use of that term. First, Antichrist as a player in premillennial dispensationalism, then as a term that is used in the book of John. Then we've looked at the man of lawlessness, which is never called the Antichrist by Paul, but is in 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, and trying to understand how this idea overlaps. Now, today, what we're going to be doing is looking at some of the other images that often are applied to the Antichrist: the dragon, the beast out of the earth, the beast out of the sea, and the great harlot in the book of Revelation. I do hope you enjoyed this catch-up, a little bit awkward's the wrong word, we were all over the place, conversation with Bryan Wolfmueller. Please do enjoy it. Oh, hey, and with that said, you do know that we have published the first 3 episodes of this series. It is called Thief in the Night Volume 1. There's a link to it in this episode. You can also find it on Amazon.com underneath my author page. Thief in the Night is the first 3 episodes of us talking about the end of days, last days madness, trying to figure out what is the real end of the world about and what does the real end of days deal with. The whole series wants to pull all those pieces apart, but you can go and read up on that opening segment. You know, how do you begin to answer your friends and neighbors when you say, I'm not sure this rapture thing's real? It's a good place to start. All right, so the last time that Pastor Bryan Wolfmueller and I talked about theology in my show, I guess we've done, it's funny, I was going to say, last time we talked, well, that was Everbook. The last time we talked theology, well, that's been Sharper Iron. The last time we talked about the end of the world together has been quite a while. You were so kind to me as I was trying to get this podcast going to just gift me every other week or so for there for a little while, the freedom to talk about an important topic, a valuable topic, and keep my podcast on a weekly basis. And then, I moved up here. Things got changed quite a bit there. I wanted to put a little more emphasis in doing it independently, having the sort of hardcore history style deep dive stuff. And then that was probably combined with my fact that I felt like I was abusing you a little bit in this, like I was taking advantage of your giving me so much. And so I just I put off the Wolfschatology, looking at the end of the world series with Pastor Bryan Wolfmueller. And I don't think it's been a year, but it's been close to a year since we talked. So I'm not even entirely sure what we talked about last. And I probably should have done that prep work, but I took a page out of your book and only prepped for the minimum of what we got to talk about now.
Good plan. Hey, by the way, speaking of this abuse, do you remember this line from Luther from The Bondage of the Will? He says, "It's the nature of love to be abused."
Oh.
No. Sorry, I got it wrong. It's the nature of love to be deceived.
Ooh, interesting. Yeah. Naivety.
It's the nature of faith to never be deceived. He's contrasting those two. So when we talk about the doctrine, we stick to it. But when it's a matter of love, so you say, here comes this person, they're begging. They say they need money for food, but they're probably going to use it for booze. And Luther said, it's the nature of love to be deceived.
Oh, interesting that you would let it go because you're being deceived ahead of time.
Yeah. So love suffers. Love suffers long. Isn't that interesting? Anyway, I was just thinking about that. I love to be on your show. That's the point.
Yeah, I appreciate that. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to do a topical study of all things end of the world, start to finish. We want to publish these things as notes for you to make use of in your own study and so forth. And so the Thief in the Night series, Volume 1, does exist. It's the first 3 episodes. We have up to, I think, 9 or 10 episodes. I don't remember what the last one was, but I do know where we are today. And where we are today is we're going to talk about big, nasty, scary-looking monsters in the book of Revelation. Right? All right. So, and there is a number of them, and they definitely get abused. I don't know how much we'll get into this individually with the way these things are understood. It kind of brings up right away the question of the literalness versus the symbolism of the book of Revelation. I mean, have you ever heard, Brian, like one of these premillennial dispensationalists, end of the world rapture people who believe there's actually going to be a giant like Godzilla coming out of the Mediterranean Sea Do they teach that? I don't know what they teach on this.
No, I don't think so. I mean, they're willing to admit that there's allegory here, but the allegory is all serving their sort of one world government conspiracy kind of stuff. The unfold, they read that it's funny, the dispensationalists, they say you got to read the book of Revelation literally. 1,000 years, that's got to be a literal 1,000 years. And then you say, well, what about the 144,000? Well, that's a symbol. Or what about the 7? Well, 7 is a symbolic number. I mean, it's like when you get down to it, the only thing that is literal is the 1,000 years, and everything else is a symbol of something.
Yeah, which really should tell you where to go. So we're going to be looking at Revelation chapter 12, 13, and 17. That's a lot of text. We won't go deep dive on this, but we want to give you the tools for how to parse the symbolism within them. Although I'll tell you, when it comes to Revelation chapter 12, Brian, Pastor Wolfmueller, I don't know what to call you. I tend to think this guy's actually a dragon at the end of the day. I even read that back into Genesis and the serpent now. I think when God spoke light into existence and Lucifer came as the light bringer, the firstborn created bit of creation, the great angel, shimmering with God's goodness, he was a glowing angelic dragon. Mm-hmm. And I think he still is. He just doesn't have feet anymore, and he likes to eat death instead of bring light. And so Christ has come to become the new day star. But that's maybe too literal. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think it's fine. I mean, so the devil is an angel, so he doesn't have a body. So he's got to steal a body. So when he comes to steal the body of a creature, he picks the most glorious, which is this dragon. It's like some sort of magnificent looking dinosaur. Yeah.
I never thought about doing it as the dinosaur. I don't think he steals a body. I think he just shows up and he's breaking the law from the start, and he's there doing evil things. But that's Genesis, and it's fun though too, because there's some freedom there as long as we don't get too dogmatic about it. We do know that he is mentioned as a dragon in Revelation chapter 12. You have this. Bryden calls it an interlude. I don't think it is. I think it's part of. Now it's been a while since I looked. It's part of the sixth. Trumpet here going on. I think it's the trumpet. That this is actually part of the whole structure. But what we want to do is just try to break down the piece itself. 12 verse 1 says, "A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and with the moon under her feet, and her head a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. And a sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon," that's the sign, right? "And 7 heads, with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. Literally, it's literally 1,260 days. There's so much here. I'm going to parse it, and then you can bounce off whatever you want to bounce off. So there's 2 signs. It's a sign God gives, and there's the sign that is the devil's destruction. The sign that God gives is the church. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, on her head a crown of 12 stars. So you have the number 12, the number of the church, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles. Now, at this point, I think she is Old Testament church. She's the 12 tribes of Israel, and that is where the 12 stars really comes in. But remember the stars being connected to the churches in Revelation chapter 1, that held in the hand of Jesus are these lampstands and stars, right? And she's pregnant, though, right? So she's bringing a seed into the world, and she's in travail. She's in the sign of the curse, that the birth would bring about great pain. That's happening, and in the midst of this, there is this other sign, this great dragon, this evil beast. It is the devil. How you picture the 7 heads and 10 horns is interesting, but now you see him trying to steal the image of God, the holy number 7 and the complete number 10. He wants to claim to be God with these crowns of his, and as he claims to be God, he takes down 1/3 of heaven. This would be where the idea that a third of the angels fell with Lucifer when he fell. And he stands there before her about to give birth because he wants to eat Jesus, right? He wants to destroy Jesus. And I don't think it's by killing him. It's by tempting him to follow him, because then he can be God. He can take God's place. But instead, she gives birth to this male child, one to rule the nations with the rod of iron. Psalm 2, right? The king who will come. Beautiful, beautiful psalm about the manliness of Jesus, frankly, the kingliness of Jesus. And then he's ascended into heaven. He goes back to the throne of God. You got the ascension of Jesus, but the woman's still here. Now we're in the New Testament, right? We have the church in the wilderness. We're sojourning. We're not in the promised land, and we have to be nourished by God for this 1,260 days. If I remember, that's the 3.5 months. That is there's another,
3.5 years, 42 months.
3.5 years, 42 months. All of this is half of 7 years, half of the complete time, right? So for the remainder of time after Jesus came, until time runs out, that's symbolized by this 1,260 days. So I know you can add to that. I just wanted to make sure that people knew I knew something before you did the rest of it.
No, you did well. This is, I think, of all the allusions to Genesis 3:15, this is probably the clearest in the New Testament. This pregnant woman, this is the seed promised to Eve in the garden, who would crush the head of the serpent. And so you see this battle coming to a head, and the incredible thing is that the battle, you didn't get to the battle, but the battle's about to happen in heaven itself. So the battle's not on earth, the battle's in heaven. The battle is before the throne of God. What voice is going to prevail before the throne of God? Is it going to be the voice of the accuser, Satan, or the voice of the advocate, Jesus? And so the devil is trying to destroy Jesus. You said he could destroy him by tempting him. I think the devil would have been pleased to kill him too. I mean, that was the Bethlehem murder of the babies and throwing all the kids in the Nile River and the Babylonian conquest of all the trouble, the travail of the Old Testament Israel is contained right there.
Let me do. Okay, good. Keep going. I should have said it this way. The devil didn't want him to die on the cross.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
So you're right. Killing him as a baby is fine. Die on the cross, not okay.
Oddly enough, when it comes down to it, the cross, even though the cross is the devil's defeat, he's the one. He comes into Judas to get Jesus on the cross. The devil he just can't help himself. He is the devil is the kind of the overflow of desire. He does not do what is best. He can't even sort this out, that it would be bad for me to destroy Jesus. He is the destroyer.
Yeah, he's ruled by passion.
Yeah, but no matter. The point is that it's this. You have this beautiful picture of the dragon waiting to devour the child who was born, which is like summarizing in one verse the entire trouble of the Old Testament people. And then you have the child was born and was caught up to God. You have the whole birth, life, death, resurrection, ascension of Jesus, all there in one verse. And then the real action starts, because Jesus ascends to the heavenly throne room where the devil has a seat. So this reminds us of Job and of, in Zechariah, where the devil is there accusing Job and accusing the high priest Joshua before the throne room of God. So the throne room of God is also a courtroom, and the devil has a place there. But now Jesus is going to ascend with his victory, with his cross, with his blood. And the good news is going to be that there was no longer any place found for the devil anymore. Beautiful. Oh, there's hardly a better, more beautiful passage.
No, it's so good. I went through the old, from when I was in Naperville, we had a list of confirmation verses that we'd let the kids pick from, and confirmation's coming up. And I went through and was kind of cleaning out a few of them. There were a few I was like, oh, that's a little heavy-handed legalism right there. But then I realized there weren't any Revelation ones. And I started going through Revelation, and there's so many awesome verses. Oh my goodness, about the devil's fall or about the New Jerusalem. There's so many amazing verses. My daughter's getting confirmed. I didn't push this at all, but she went straight for one of them. Very proud of her, because she's going to have awesome verses.
On the confirmation certificates that we made, we put one of the images that we used was Saint Michael driving the spear through the devil's head from this text, Revelation 12.
Yeah. Do you know I have a statue of Michael fighting the dragon? It's my absolute. It's about 2.5 feet tall, cast iron, I think, and a marble base. I bought that years ago because it's my favorite picture in the scriptures. My favorite sermon I've ever given talks about, I pulled out that statue and I pulled out a crucifix and I put them beside each other and said, this is the same moment. And it really shows my sin that I like the creature defeating the dragon more than I like the guy actually doing it, giving him the power by which he does it. It shows, I don't want to look at the cross. I'd rather look at the victory in an imaginative, happy, manly way than watching the guy who actually did it. And there's nothing beautiful about a crucifix because it is us, and yet it is what he did for us, right?
Yeah. It is stunning, though, that Jesus destroys the devil, crushes his head, and then he says to Michael, why didn't you just kick him out of here? I mean, Michael couldn't have done, but now that the devil is destroyed, and even remember how Paul ends the book of Romans, that the Lord will now crush the devil under our feet.
Yeah. I think it's all the same moment. I think it's this transcosmic reality. It's outside of time, right? So Jesus says, I saw Satan fall like lightning, like before Satan was crushed, but he did it already. Like it's just from the foundation of the world, it's been done and all that. There's some marvelous thing in which so even as we're crushing the devil under our feet by trusting in the Lord in our deaths, precious in the sight of him as the death of us, through that faith alone, we are merely in Christ on the cross, being transported to that moment where Satan is being destroyed with the mortal wound that will end him on the last day, right? Okay. War arises in heaven. That's verse 7. I wasn't going to go all the way through this here, but maybe I should. The dragon and his angels fight back against Michael. There's no place found for him. We talked about that. He's thrown down. The dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satanas, is the Greek there, deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So again, the idea that there are fallen angels as well. A loud voice proclaims the song of Revelation. Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of God and the authority of Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down. Kind of skipping a little. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death. Rejoice, O heavens! Woe to you, O earth and sea! The devil has come down, and his time is short. So he is here. He is here. The little season of Satan exists, that 7 years or 6 years underneath the 1,000-year reign of Christ, in which he is trying to deceive the nations. But the nations are also being brutally beaten by Jesus' rod of iron so that we would come out of them, right? So that we would be called out. There's more verses, but you look like you're bursting at the seams here.
It's great. I mean, I just love it.
It's good.
All day. It's so fantastic that there's no, and the three things, I used to think there was two things with which the saints on earth overcame the devil: the blood of the Lamb, the word of the testimony. So that's the Lord's Supper and preaching. But then there's a third thing. They did not love their lives unto death. And this has to do with Hebrews 2, that the devil holds us in bondage through the fear of death. But when we don't love our lives unto death, we actually are overcoming the devil. We not only are we free from his bondage, but we put him in bondage. That this is the resisting the devil is not being afraid to die. So the devil comes and says, I'm going to kill you. We say, okay. The picture, I think the picture of this, as I'm studying Luther, remember that scene in Kung Fu Panda? You saw Kung Fu Panda,
I did
right?
see the first one. I haven't seen the others.
Yeah, the first one where there's the Kung Fu Panda, and here he's fighting the tiger, Tai Lung at the end. And he's got this super nerve move that he does that freezes people, makes them paralyzed. And it's a super strong, powerful move. And so he goes and he hits him with it. And Kung Fu Panda is so fat that it doesn't get through to his nerves. It just tickles him. And he's like, "Whoo, stop it. That tickles. And he's like, what? My power doesn't work on you because my worst assault is just like tickling us. And I think this is the picture of spiritual warfare. The devil says, all right, now I'm really going to bring the war. I'm going to bring you death. And we're like, "Whoo, all right. I get to go see Jesus face to face. Stop tickling me, And so he doesn't have the power of death. And that enrages him so bad that he just kind of goes, and then he gets defeated. So this is the picture of spiritual warfare. He said they did not love their lives unto death. There was, in fact, a joy for the Christian in death because it means passing from death to life and to the joys of the presence of Christ. And it's one step closer to the resurrection of the body. And that it enrages the devil. Yeah,
that bit's really amazing in there. I know you've got this ability to be happy about your impending death that I don't quite have yet. But the source of it.
close to me.
The source of it is that text and that faith. So
You can be happy for my impending death. That'll get you one step closer.
I don't know about that. I think I'll be weeping pretty hard when you die, man, because the church needs you. Verse 13, when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who gave birth to the male child. So now it's like going back and like we're back in the story that we had the overview of before, but then again, is the male child now us as well, right? He pursued the woman. I'm sorry. So he's chasing after us. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle so she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness to the place where she is to be nourished for a time, times, and half a time. There's your, the other way of referring to that 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days is times, time, and half a time. It means the right amount of time, right? He pours out water like a river from his mouth after her. So now he's a water dragon, to sweep her away with the flood. Although count that in your, how is water a source of destruction in the history of the church and the history of the Old Testament? But the earth came to the help of the woman. The earth came. The earth opened his mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. So now suddenly, new man out of the dust, right? New Adam is made the flood into baptism. I don't know. I'm not sure about that verse. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. And now we're going to hit the beasts out of that.
He brings the beast. He says, I'm going to enlist others in this army to destroy the church. Oh man. And it's at least for us to remember that the church has enemies, that we have enemies, that the devil's always after us. But remember, this is an amazing text. James 4? James 4:7. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Have I told you my story about chasing the baby pigs? This story came to mind as an illustration of this when I was in Australia.
No, I've not heard about you chasing the baby pigs.
So when I was in Australia, when I was a kid, we'd go and go. They have all these wild pigs all over, and the parents. I mean, the big wild pigs are dangerous. They maul you, but the little piglets are not that. So we drive by, and there's these piglets that are on the side of the road, and so the guy stops and, Wolfie, grab one of the piglets. So I jump out of the car and I'm chasing this little baby piglet through the outback in Australia. And it's running from me. Reed. And I'm chasing it. Oh, I'm going to get you, little piggy. And I'm getting closer and closer. And I'm right there on top of it. And the pig turns around, stops, turns around, looks at me and squeals. And I jumped in the air and I turned around and I started running away. And it chased me for 10, 15 feet. And I'm like, this little baby, like, 1 foot, like 12-inch little baby pig is chasing me and I'm running from it. And then it turns and starts running away from me. And then I start chasing it again. Now this happens like 3 or 4 times. Like as long as it's afraid and running from me, I'm there. I'm the tyrant. I'm going to destroy it. But as soon as it stops and growls at me, I'm afraid and I'm running from it. And this is how it is. This is what James says, resist the devil and he will flee from you. So it's this game that the devil's playing with us. He's chasing after us like he can destroy us, like he has any authority to destroy us. He does not. He's been defeated. And yet he still roars after us like a lion, like he can devour us. And as long as we're running scared, he keeps pursuing us. But when we stop and squeal a bit, when we resist him with the blood of the Lamb, it doesn't just say he stops. It's just hard for us to even imagine. He
runs away. Yeah.
From us. He runs scared. It's an amazing thing to think about. Now I don't know how I feel about the fact that I'm the devil in that little parable that I told, but I think it gets to the point, right? I mean, I was the fool who thought I was going to get the pig, but this is the joke. I was never going to get the pig, and this is how it is with us. I mean, that we belong to Jesus, not to the devil. And this is the point of Revelation 12. He cannot accuse us before God in heaven. He cannot bring our sins. That he's been washed out with this flood of blood from Jesus. His throne has been washed out of that place, so that there's nothing more to accuse. There's nothing the devil can't do anything now. And so he comes down and in the courtroom of our own conscience, in the courtroom of this world, he tries to accuse us, but he can't accuse us before God the Father. There is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus.
So the whole thing, verse 13 to 17, makes sense to me as being a description of our current situation. And it's setting up how we're going to see 2 powers in the earth attacking the church. That's what the beasts are going to be. So, but him being thrown down to the earth, okay, so the devil can't accuse us in heaven. The wings of the eagle that we might fly into the wilderness, I'm a little less sure of that one. Now I can't remember. One of the Revelation episodes I did was on eagle wings and how hard it is to find anything in the Bible from it. There's a bit about a multicolored, I do these shows and then it doesn't stay in my brain. It was so cool. It was like a deep dive on these multicolored wings. Where did I find that? Somebody who's listening is screaming at me like, you don't listen to your own stuff? I know that part now. So what do eagle wings have to say? Time, half a time again is very clearly, I think, there's any debate on this, honestly, is the right amount of time is what it means, and it's a reference to you have two of these right amounts of time, the right amount of time before Jesus comes and the right amount of time after Jesus comes. But this bit about the water coming out of his mouth and the flood, now you said the flood of the blood of Jesus. Okay, sure. But how is the devil, the dragon, spewing water at us, and then how is the earth coming to our rescue? Now, I said a moment ago, it's the flood of death and destruction, which we see in the ancient flood, and then it is the man born of man, Jesus coming of the dust of the earth to turn the flood into the waters of baptism. This sounds nice, but I mean, I don't know. Does that really work? That's a big jump.
I don't know what these pictures mean, but the whole point of it is that, so here comes we are this woman and we are her offspring. This is the church, and the devil comes after us and we're like, whoa. But then the Lord gives us wings, you fly away. And then here comes the flood and we're, whoa. But then the earth opens up and takes the water. In other words, it's just this, the devil's always trying to do what God did. So he tries to chase after us, but the Lord protects us, and he tries to destroy us with a flood, but it's foiled. So the devil's always trying to copy God and to be the anti-God. But when the Lord sends a flood, it works. He destroys the earth. Only Noah's left alive. But when the devil sends a flood, it peters off into this hole in the ground, and it's great. It's so the Lord protects us. I mean, that's the point. Is we see the devil wins when we are afraid. And the whole picture here is, it's true that we have a old evil foe who means deadly woe, but he's nothing compared to, he runs from us. He runs from, and so here comes the flood, and we see the flood coming, and we think, boy, oh boy, this is like this tidal wave, this tidal wave vomited out of a dragon mouth, and we're like, wow, what are we going to do with that? And the Lord says, no problem, got you covered.
And so he stands there and he knows on his own he can't do it. He's on the shore of the sea, and it's like you got this kind of majestic, ancient sorcerer image here where he starts waving and the sea starts to froth and boil, and he calls, maybe it's like Pokemon Go. He's like, I call you, Leviathan. He just throws down his Pokemon ball. But he's going to call forth these two beasts. And before we get into the text proper, I want to make sure we're on the same page of the meaning of these two beasts. I think we are, because we both get our stuff from Lutheran sources. You have a beast out of the sea and a beast out of the earth. And if you are living in Turkey, particularly, where John is writing, but also if you're just in Jerusalem, where John is also writing he's not writing Revelation to them, but it's in the area, so you could make that argument, I think. Then there are two threats that come to you as a Christian. One can walk to you, and the other one needs to take a boat. The one that can walk to you is the Pharisaical movement of the Jews, the false church, which will accuse you before the one who comes across in the boat, which is the Roman government, the Roman army. So you have the beast out of the sea is Rome initially, and the beast out of the earth is the synagogue, and both of these are going to be threats to you. Now that's the narrow threat, but these are also, even though these are real, these are literal, actual people and events and times that you see in Acts taking place. I mean, Paul has to be let down out of a basket so that the Jews don't kill him, and he's beaten, right, and eventually killed by the Romans. They are also symbolic as real things of a grander place, a bigger picture that it doesn't matter what civilization or time you're in. The devil always works through these two things to try to destroy the church. One is government, and one is false religion. Mm-hmm. So really, ultimately, the beast out of the sea is the government when it sets itself against God, and the beast out of the earth is religion when it sets itself against God. Are you with me on that, or you got a different take?
I'm exactly with you. I think it's even explained by John that way in chapter 17, and it's nice to see. So the devil is always in the anti-business. So the beast is the anti-lamb, and the prostitute is the anti-bride. So that you have these. You have the anti-kingdom. You have the kingdom of darkness, which is standing against the Lord's kingdom of light. And so the first beast, and it's not an accident that John sees that the Lord gives John the vision of this beast with the same vision that the Lord gave to Daniel. So he sees this beast that has it's the body of a leopard, the feet of a bear, the mouth of a lion. That's straight from Daniel chapter 7, where he saw these successive world kingdoms come. I mean, I think the lion was the Assyrians, or the lions was the Medo-Persians, and the bear was the Assyrians, the leopard was the Greek, and then the beast was the Roman Empire. And so John sees this vision of Rome as this conglomeration of these beasts, and it's the anti-lamb. The lamb comes to die to give us life. The beast comes to devour us to give us death. And so the devil has coerced the nations of the world into the anti-church, to be the enemy of the church and stand against the kingdom of God.
To get super real with it, like, you see this so directly now in the amount of trust people put in their government to protect and give them a good life. And it's not like one party is better than the other at this, but there is certainly one party who very loudly likes to say it's the government's job to take care of you. And fine, you want to have a good king who hands out bread to the poor, fine. But when you believe that the power of the sword is going to be the power of life, you are submitting yourself to the lie of this beast. The power of the sword is not the power of life, and that's the great threat that I think. I think the reason that politics is such a religion for both conservative and liberal in America is because we have so much trust in this devouring, raging beast. What do you think?
There's the three estates: the state, the family, and the church. And the most important ones are the family and the church. And the state is the little baby one. It's the little horn off to the side, but it always wants to be the biggest horn. It always wants to exalt itself. So it's always tempting us to think that it is the most important thing. I've got the sword. So we're always tempted to think that politics is the most important topic, that the state is the most important thing, but that is part of the lie.
Who is like the government? Who can fight against it? Right? It's right out of verse 4. So he sees the beast coming out of the sea, 10 hordes, 7 heads. So this is a little different than the dragon, right? No, it was
same. They both have. Wait.
Yeah, 7 heads with 10 horns. And the question is, how do they fit?
The difference is that it's rising out of the sea. So you see the horns first and then the heads. So you see the 10 horns and then you see the 7 heads. Before in chapter 12, you saw the 7 heads and then the 10 horns on top and then the 7 diadems. This has the 10 horns first and then the 7 heads, and then you see, instead of jewels, you see blasphemies.
Right. But it has 10 diadems instead of 7, and it had 7 and 12. Is that right? I'm going to go back and look at that now.
7 diadems and 12.
So there's a number shift with regard to the number of crowns, but I think what you're getting here is that this beast is in the image of the devil. Right? It is his image. He has put his stamp upon it. And then you already talked about the conglomeration of world kingdoms, leopard and lion and bear. And the dragon gives his power and his throne and great authority. Right? So he's putting all of his own chips into this. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound. So it really kind of is the devil himself at this point as well. This is, I think, the wound. Its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. I don't think this is about the rising and fall of any particular kingdom. It may be about the rising and fall of government as something we put our trust in, but I think it's also about the wound that the devil received from Jesus. Maybe I'm wrong on that. The
devil always wants to give these fake resurrections.
That's interesting.
I mean, he's trying to copy the lamb. So he says, I'm wounded like the lamb, but I'm raised like the lamb too. And a lot of the old guys saw this, all the old Protestant guys saw this as the fall of the Roman Empire and the rise of the papacy. Which
it's hard not
if you're
to like
looking
that.
I know it. If you're looking for something specific, that's a pretty, so that the Pope, I mean, it is an amazing sort of thing when Boniface VIII comes along in 1302 and says the Pope has both swords. It's really hard not to see the beast with a mortal wound rising back up to destroy.
Right. Man, Try telling that to a Catholic, though, my friend. So hard.
Well, it's interesting that when you get to here a little bit later, and in verse 17, when it describes the 7 heads as the 7 hills, the Roman Catholic interpreters will say, well, that means it's the city of Rome.
Yeah.
They'll say it.
Yeah.
Wow. You just can't get around that conclusion, because John is going to explain, here's the meaning of the 7 heads. It is the 7 hills upon which sit the 7.
And so that gets it too. So because the 2 beasts are government and false religion. So what the papacy was able to do and then persecute the church with it was they had both of them in the same man, right?
Mm-hmm.
It had full government and full false religion, and so they merged the 2 beasts into one. You mentioned the blasphemy. The beast was given a mouth uttering haughty blasphemies, verse 5. Allowed to exercise this for 42 months. There it is, right? So for the right amount of time, New Testament era, it opens his mouth to utter blasphemies against God. Those who dwell in heaven make war against the saints and conquer them. We are more than conquerors through him who loved us, but we are not the conquerors. We actually get put to death. Authority was given over every tribe, people, language, nation, all who dwell on the earth, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of Lamb, who was slain. So the idea here also that if you're under the king, who is Jesus, the authority that is over the nations is no longer over you. The strong man has been bound. He cannot deceive you. He can deceive the nations. He cannot deceive you. But then martyrdom is part of that, right? If you have an ear, check it out. If you're going to be made a slave, well, to slavery you go. If you're going to get sawn in two, well, sawn in two and you will be. This is a call for endurance and faith. Oh, thanks, God. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Well, this is the crown. If everybody who's wearing a crown in the book of every Christian who's wearing a crown is wearing a crown on a head that was cut off. So, but now here's the point of it. I think this is something we really, because all of us are going to die. The sooner we get our heads around that, the better. Every single one of us, unless Jesus comes back, we're going to die one way or another. Okay, so fine. So you could die resting in your bed, surrounded by your family at an old age. That would be beautiful, quite wonderful. Your kids and grandkids could be singing hymns while you breathe your last, and you don't have pain or whatever. It could be some sort of terrible accident. It could be you're thrown in prison. It could be that you have your head cut off by someone who hates Jesus. It could be there's a lot of different ways that this thing happens. And so we say, okay, so I know I'm going to die, but that's not. I know. In fact, we say here, I know I'm going to be conquered. He gave the beast the authority. God gave the beast the authority to conquer the church, those who resist the number of the beast and so forth. Okay, so the Lord has handed me over to death, but that does not mean that is not the final defeat. That's my final victory. The Lord, in the great mystery of his kingdom, has made my death the most precious gift, and that's where the crown comes in. And so even though he conquers them, he doesn't win anything. In fact, the Lord, I got to read, I got this Luther quote where he talks about, the martyrs dance to their death. And so, he quotes this hymn. I'm going to find it because he talks about how the tyrants unknowingly lead us to bliss unimagined.
Huh.
So the devil comes along and unknowingly, or maybe even knowing, whatever, he can't help himself. He takes us to the great joy that we are looking forward to the most. I'm going to find it. Okay, keep going, and I'll find you this little Luther quote.
So the use of the word endurance here is a pretty direct throwback to chapter 1, where John calls himself his brother in the tribulation and the endurance. So endurance is a faith word here. He really connects it to the faith of the saints. So to be a believer in Christ is to endure the suffering of the present age with the promises that you don't feel, but you hear and you believe, being greater than that. I lost what I was going to say. So the more than conquerors text out of Romans chapter 8. It's not that we're conquerors. We're more than conquerors. Conquerors would be not enough, right? And so it is in your death, you are more than a conqueror. In your death, your sin cannot contain you. In your death, you with creation are waiting for the sons of God to be revealed. To own that, everyone loves that text about neither height nor depth can separate us from the love of Christ, because we like to kind of use it as sort of a happy motif to make everything better. But it only is better when you see that you're not escaping the suffering and the pain. You are being saved through it into a greater thing altogether. So I think that's pretty huge. The second beast, we're going to have more of the first beast as he comes back, but the second beast rises out of the earth. So again, notice the proximity. If you're living in Ephesus, the proximity of Rome, they got to come across the water to get you. If they're coming up from Jerusalem, they just walk. And the beast comes out of the earth. This one has 2 horns, like a lamb. So it looks like Jesus. Oh, wait, he speaks like a dragon, right? So he's a false sheep. He exercises all authority of the first beast in its presence. So now it's kind of working in tandem with the first beast and makes all the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. So false religion ultimately takes you back to worshiping authority of men and the authority of the sword. It performs great signs. This is huge. Even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of the people. That's something Elijah had done, like one of the greatest signs you could imagine. The point here is that false religion can, in fact, do supernatural things. We know this from the demons we see in the book of Acts. It is just because someone can actually heal your disease doesn't mean that it's from God. And it's crazy to think about how in the world today, that's for Christians, that's such a sign of God's presence is the miracles. And in the New Testament, it's a sign of false teaching. Multiple times, it's a sign of false teaching.
Yeah,
so,
Jesus says it in his text in Matthew 24. He says, on the last days, many will come doing signs that will deceive, if possible, even the elect.
Did you find your poem? You're distracting me.
I did. Oh, here, look, it says this. So here first is the Luther quote. He says, the world, to be sure, intends to do us harm, but it really accomplishes no more than what the church sings about the martyrs. Unknowingly, they lead us into eternal joys. Unknowingly and involuntarily, the world leads the Christian through torture and death to eternal joys. Such tortures are nothing else, as St. Agatha said, than taking our arm in a friendly way and leading us to heaven as a bride is led to a dance. Whatever harm is done to Christians by the world, God turns back their anger and lets the harm redound to the Christians' advantage. And then here's my comment on this text. You got to tell me if you think this is helpful. Suffering helps us lift our eyes to the life beyond, as Luther says, to eternal life where true joys are to be found, where Jesus is preparing a place for us. Because death brings us into the kingdom of Christ, and because suffering brings us closer to death, the troubles of this life lead us to eternal joys. The devil cannot help but serve our Lord Jesus. He tempts us, troubles us, threatens us, tortures us, and takes us by the hand and leads us to our bridegroom Christ. What glory. Lord, give us eyes to see what Agnes and Agatha saw. Those are the saints that Luther talks about there.
What's your commentary on it?
That was my commentary.
Oh, I thought you read it.
Yeah, I was reading my own commentary.
Oh, I thought you were reading Luther. I thought you were Luther that whole time. That's my response. Like, oh, Luther was pretty good there. I like that. That wasn't bad.
This is the line. This is the line. That I want to. The devil cannot help but serve our Lord Jesus Christ. He tempts us, troubles us, threatens us, tortures us, and takes us by the hand and leads us to Christ.
Yeah, it's God's devil. So I've had this image come up several times now, going back to when I was talking about, when you said the devil can't help killing Jesus, even though he knows it's his undoing. Gog and Magog, the description of God says, I'll set a trap for you. And you will be unable to resist it, and you'll come to me. You'll have a hook in your nose, pulling you to me, but it'll be you doing it, right? You're going to come here, and you will come and build your own destruction. It's a beautiful image. I want to go back to more Gog and Magog when we get back into Revelation after Daniel's all over, but that's a different topic. So we're talking about this lamb that talks like a dragon and is performing signs, right? So the false teachers perform signs, worked in the presence of the beast, deceiving those who dwell on the earth. It's verse 14, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. Oh, the image, that's interesting. I'm running that through the Pope lens again here and wondering a little bit. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. I'm still waiting for the evangelical premillennial dispensationalists to believe there's going to be a talking statue somewhere in the UN at some point.
That's probably, it's the TV. That's what it is. Well, that's the image that talks.
That's very literal. That's very literal. There's no breath in my TV. And it also causes, let's see, I'm going to finish the text. It causes, verse 16, it causes all, both great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead. Clearly that's tattoos. So no one can buy or sell unless they have the mark. That is the name of the beast or the number of its name. Now, this is not the name of the second beast. This is the name of the first beast, right? So the second beast is working on behalf of the first beast. This is, again, the lamb is not only a picture of Jesus, it's a picture of Judaism. It's a picture of the sacrificial system and reinstituting sacrifices and pointing back to the power of the sword. The image of that first beast, then. The name of the beast or the number of its name is now the mark that's being put on us. And now John stops. He really does. He's like, slow down. If you've been reading too fast here, this calls for discernment. You need to do some math here. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. That is, this is so far from literal, my friends. If you think this is literal, you're crazy. For it is the number of a man. It is the number of a man. Calculate it. Do the math. His number is 666. It is not 666. English looks that way because you use Arabic numerals. But in the Greek, it is written out longhand, like you would on a check. 666. I was going to say, on the literal thing, one of my favorite stupid things I ever saw was a lady trying to convince people that Monster Soda was the mark of the beast because it is the M looks like three vavs or wows from Hebrew, which in Hebrew numerals is the number 6. So she was wrong on so many levels. She didn't have 666 in Hebrew. She only had 666 in Hebrew. And then that had led her to believe that Monster Soda was, in fact, the mark of the beast. Insane. It's Chiron, Neron Kaiser, right? Nero Caesar is what I think it comes down to.
Yeah, I think that's the best. I mean, this is the reason, because, in the ancient world, the numbers and the letters were the same. You'd have to use the letters for the numbers. And so what you could do is you could just add up a person's name. So Jonathan Fisk is a certain number, and Bryan Wolfmueller is a certain. You just add up the value of the letters that make up our name. And he's saying, when you add up the number of the beast here, you get 666. So Nero Caesar works, and I think there's a couple of other Caesars that actually work, but I think Nero Caesar is the best. When you add that up somehow, and that old ancient math, that's what you get.
So it's my understanding of this is that it's not so much adding is it's like Roman numerals. When you write in Roman numerals, you would have a series, think of football, it's XLL. And then you jump to another letter when it gets larger. So if you write out the number 666, not in Roman numerals, but in Hebrew numerals, that's where you get these 6 letters, which are NRN, C or K, whatever sound you want, whatever makes that sound. It's like I forget what the Hebrew letter is, but CSR. And now you're in Hebrew without vowels, which we're used to anyway. Hebrew doesn't have vowels. And so you have to fill in the vowels, and you have Neron Kaiser. Now, why would it be that? This is what's really convinced me, aside from the fact that the numbers work. What is John writing for? He's sitting on a rock jail island, aware of the fact that his people are far away without him, knowing that, writing to warn them that they need endurance, because a beast out of the earth and this is going to turn them over to the beast out of the sea, so that Rome's going to come and persecute them again. Now, Nero has already existed. Nero has come and gone by this time, but Diocletian has not. And depending on how you want to do the math on when John was writing, the Diocletian persecution, which is the first worldwide persecution, is about to take place. The Neronic persecution was only in was only in Rome. And we know his name because he was sick when he did it. He burned people as torches for his dinner parties. But Diocletian's was far worse in that it killed far more people. And so what I think is going on here is in the middle of this, he's like, hey, soldier, can I have some paper? He's like, why? It's like, well, I'm going to write a letter. He's like, I don't know if you can write a letter. I'm going to write a story. And you can write a story. And so he's like, it's got the eagle and the dragon and all this crazy things happening and floods. And then there's this mark of the beast. It's 666. Calculate the number, guys. Check it out. It's coming. And then he goes back into the story again. And the story definitely gives us this. We've been talking about the beauty of the hope that's within us. But he's actually sending a secret message to his people to just let them know, this is coming. This is real.
Right.
Huh?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And don't be afraid of it. You should have wisdom without fear. There's a problem with the kind of conspiracy theory approach to the Book of Revelation, and all the 666 and the monster drink stuff, and all the barcodes and implanted microchips. Is it stokes fear?
Right.
How many times have you heard someone give that kind of interpretation of the Book of Revelation and said, "Therefore, don't be afraid"? It's the opposite. It's trying to stoke up fear, which is that's the anti-point of Revelation. It's taking it and doing the exact opposite with it.
So now the beast is going to come back one more time in the book. So we're
This is
agreed.
the best. I really love this.
But now I can't find it.
17.
I said 17. I'm scrolling through. Oh, I'm in 16. That's why I can't find it. I thought so. Oh, there we go. And so the beast is going to come back, and now it's not just the beast. And now you got to. I love this. What do you think about this? This is kind of a waste of time thought, but like, isn't it interesting how we take all the words that the Bible uses, and when we translate them in English, we try to make them as vanilla and not offensive as possible. So you could say this is the harlot. You could say this is the whore. But no, we're going to use the word prostitute because that's just nice and not that it's clean, but it's such a soft. The whore. We're not allowed to say that word, but that's the word. The whore and the beast, right? So you're going to have this whore, this woman who sells her body for sex to any man who will come. That's the image here. The woman who
she's wearing the crowns from the devil.
Well, I'm just going with the idea of what a prostitute is and trying to emphasize how. Look, if you're listening, you're a prostitute. God saves you. God forgives you. God loves you. The problem is not your identity as a human being. You're fallen. We all are. The problem is that you hate yourself so much that you've given up what God has given you in the value of your body and decided that your body is merely a tool to be sold. That is loss and grief. And the end of woman is the rejection of children. So that reality is who the devil wants us to be on every level, to prostitute ourselves on every level, not just sexually, but on everything, to see ourselves merely as those who can get what we can out of this age while we can, and to use our identity for that, to serve self. And that's the image he takes here. One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls of wrath comes and says, I'm going to show you the judgment of the great harlot, the great whore. She's seated on many waters, which is an image of chaos, right? We've talked about this before, image of chaos and death and destruction, seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality. So here's your authority, right? All the authority of the kings of the earth have been subjected to her. The wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on the earth have become drunk. He carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. So there we go, first beast in all likelihood. She's arrayed in purple and scarlet, so she wants to be a queen. Adorned on her head is gold, jewels, pearls. Holds in her hand a cup full of abominations and impurities of her sexual immorality. Now, maybe I'm wrong on this here. She wants to be a queen. She wants to appear rich, but in her hand is this cup full of abomination. He's used sexual immorality several times here. I think it's bigger than sex. I think it's false religion. I think it's false worship. I think it's everything I was saying before about why sexual immorality is actually a rejection of your gift as a body, right? And so it's more than just the sex. On her forehead is written the name of the mystery Babylon the Great, mother of whores and abomination of the earth. I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus.
Look at that.
I greatly marveled. What do you think?
What a picture! I mean, just drunk with the martyr blood. Oh, so here's the false bride, right? So you have the bride of Christ adorned, and the woman, or even the woman running in the wilderness, running from the dragon, but having children. So the virgin who's having children, that's the picture of the church. This prostitute with just death, with corpses surrounding her, is the picture of the anti-church. It is a profound picture of destruction and lifelessness. And this, I mean, it's this sort of life lived after desire. It is. I think you're right. It's more than sex, but probably right now it's not. I mean, our culture is just, we're in the midst of this sexual revolution, which is just, I mean, out of hand. So it certainly includes that as well. But this is the great thing. So then John's going to describe what this vision is. So the prostitute riding on the beast. So think of it like this: the anti-church riding on the anti-kingdom, on the state that's kind of, and they're all coming to destroy the church. And then John is going to explain what they mean. The heads are the kings and the hills and all this sort of stuff. But then by the time you get to the end, the beast has turned. Here's this prostitute riding on the beast, or the whore riding on the beast. This and it's the ugliest picture you can think. But here she comes in triumph, like a general riding on an elephant or a horse or something, coming to destroy the church. But by the time you get to the end of the chapter, the beast has turned on the woman and is devouring her. So by the time you get to the end of the vision in chapter 17, the beast has despised the woman and is now simply she came in this great and this is we see this coming. We're like, oh boy, here we're the church, we're being attacked. But by the end of it, now here's the beast, like the corpse of the prostitute is on the ground, and the beast is with 7 heads of the beast are digging into the corpse and devouring it. And there you are watching.
It's like she's on this like 7-headed 10-horned rhinoceros, right? And then she falls off, and then it turns, and you mentioned the pig mauling people. You know, the rhinoceros just trampling all. Have you ever watched an elephant kill a tiger? Holy moly! I mean, it's all about weight and crushing. It is a terrifying thing to behold. But that's kind of what's going to happen here to her. I want to back on my hatred of vanilla words. So I said whore over prostitute, and I've been thinking about that word beast, which isn't so bad, but it's not. Think of monstrosity or abomination. I mean, there's much greater words we have than these very vanilla words.
You know what I think? What this reminds me of? I heard on the news the other day that the transgender activists were suing the feminist ladies' college so the dudes can go to school, and I'm like, that's the beast eating the whore.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, that's good.
Like sitting there eating popcorn, you know. It's all the enemies of the church eventually, because there's at last they're just devouring, and there's nothing left to devour, so they have to start devouring themselves.
So John marvels at this. He's shocked by it, as we are when we normally see it too, unless you're Brian, and then you can be like, there it is. I told you it was coming. Yeah, that's it right there.
He's eating the prostitute. Yeah. I know, it's when you see it. It's like when you see Islam conquering secular Europe, you're like, beast eating the prostitute.
What do your kids say when you're sitting on the couch? You're like, get the whore. Get the beast gets the whore. Like you're just shouting that out loud. I mean, what are they thinking? They gotta be like, Dad's off his rocker again.
Yeah, that's right. Again,
take your meds. Take your meds, Dad. So John marvels at this, and then the angel, there's an angel that comes and talks to him. This happens several times in the book. I'll tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast. And this, I'm not sure I know this part. So the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. Okay, fine. So it's effectively the devil. So's the woman, the whore, and the dwellers on the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. It pretends to be like God. So he's talking about how everyone's going to follow this beast. This calls for a mind of wisdom. The 7 heads are the 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. And there's your Rome, right? The 7 hills of Rome. It's you're right. It's so hard to miss that. I wish we didn't call it Antichrist because the word's not used.
But the Roman Catholic theologians are like, yeah, it's Rome.
But there are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come. And when he does, he must remain only a little while. Now, what on earth? As for the beast, it is an 8th, but belongs to the 7th, and it goes to destruction. Why? And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power. Oh, wait, so after the 7, there's more? But they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour. That's short reign. Together with the beast, these are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer, for he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called chosen and faithful. That part makes more sense, I think,
that
to anybody.
Is the good part.
Yeah, but the part about these, how many kings and so long and for a bit, I mean, that's where the dispensationalists get real excited, right? As they try to like line all that up with, I don't know, George Bush.
Yeah, like the one world ruler and the UN and all this sort of stuff. And this is just, you have to look. I think we can judge that tree by its fruit. I mean, is the fruit of that kind of interpretation confident, wise faith, or is it fear?
Yeah.
And the answer is, I mean, 100%, it's fear. Look, the point is, it's look, there's going to be another horn. I mean, we're going to be on the horns. There's going to come another tyrant. He'll be there for an hour, and then he'll be gone. There'll be another one for an hour. They'll fall, and kingdoms will rise and fall and fall and why. And the earth will marvel at this, but not you. You just know it's going to happen. But you belong to the Lamb who conquers, and you are given names like elect and chosen. That's the good stuff.
So it is the idea of the rise and fall of nations, and that the numbers 7 and 10 are allowed to remain, holy and complete. This is, again, God's got the right number of these rising and falling nations there for us to be saved through the midst of it. Did I ever tell you the story about fear and dispensationalism and how this was like before I was really a Lutheran. Like I was going to a Lutheran church, but I didn't know Lutheranism at all. And I was a Christian bookstore, praise singer kind of guy. And I remember listening to stuff about the premillennial point of view, reading Left Behind, all this stuff, and it scared the crap out of me. And there was a point at which, and I don't know, this has to be like baptism at work. Like there's a point at which I was like, you know what? God's not really supposed to make me afraid like this. Like Christianity isn't supposed to make me afraid like this. I wonder if there's anyone who says that what they're saying is wrong. And I went and I found a book. I had to dig at the Christian bookstore. It was like bottom shelf. There's like two options. A book on like, it was called Last Days Madness. And it's why dispensationalism is wrong. And I was so thankful that he was attentive to the text and like just walked through and gave a lot of history and all this stuff. But it really came out of this inkling I had. The test that you've mentioned now twice. Like there's a point for fear. We should be afraid of certain things. But that is not what the gospel is supposed to give us. And that is not what, and that's not what Revelation is supposed to give us. It's supposed to give us confidence and hope. Now, we haven't gotten to that. We're going to run out of time here for you. I promised you an hour. We're at 58 minutes. We haven't talked about the woman getting trampled, and I don't see it. You said it was in this chapter. I'm not seeing it in the text.
Yeah. So look at verse 16. The 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot. And they will make her desolate and naked and eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. So the horns now of the beast turn and devour the harlot or the prostitute, the whore, and burn her, devour.
And the whole next chapter is the world mourning. The government fell apart. What are we going to do? Right? Which I know that feeling, right? I know that feeling. I worry about it. But that's it's missing, right? It's missing something. It's missing that these are indeed monstrosities, that this is indeed a whorish way of life and thinking, that the authority that the devil has usurped from God, while God will bend it back to our good, it is being used in great evil. It is draconic in the worst sense. Yeah. And all of these images here, John is picking intentionally so that we would first, as you said, not be surprised when we see these things, call them the monstrosities, the ugly things that they are, and then see the hope that shines through the midst of them, so that as they take our arms and walk us to the bridegroom in our death, we rejoice in that matter. Yeah?
That's right.
That's exactly it. Put a bow on this thing for us here.
Well, it's the Lord's will is done here. I mean, even as this beast, like you said, the devil is the Lord's devil. The beast is the Lord's beast, and the prostitute is the Lord's prostitute. Look at what it says right here. God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose. I found this great little paragraph in the Formula of Concord on election and God's foreknowledge the other day. And they want to be really careful to say God is not the source of evil, nor does he help evil, but he knows about evil for 6 reasons. So that he can give a limit to it, both its scope and its time, so that he can oppose it, that he can fight against it, and he can punish it, and so that he can use it for his glory and for our salvation. So the Lord uses the devil, he uses the pagan kingdoms, he uses all of this sort of stuff for our sake. Jesus, this is the central vision of Revelation, is not the vision of the beast destroying the church. It's the vision of the Lamb sitting on the throne. That stands above everything. The King of Kings and Lord of Lords, that Jesus rules and reigns all things for the sake of his church. That is for your sake, Jonathan, for my sake, for everyone who's listening to us. The 3 people, or no, this is raw. You got lots of them.
Well, we got more than 3. More than 3. It's not a lot. It's more than 3.
For everyone listening to us, listen, Jesus right now, the one who died for you, is sitting on the throne and ruling and reigning all things for your sake, for your benefit, for your salvation. That's the vision that Revelation is pushing into our hearts and consciences, and it's absolutely wonderful.
You made me think with this idea of God using the evil for his own good purposes. He uses I don't know how well you know Tolkien. He uses the One Ring. You're not supposed to use the ring. You can't use the ring for good. You can't use evil for good, but God does. And yet, if you look at the One Ring and how it is destroyed, it's such a marvelous thing. It devours itself. Smeagol, Gollum, is so hungry for the power that he attacks Frodo, who's hungry for the power, and in their wrestling, Gollum bites off his finger, wounds him, right? And then he falls, and he accidentally slips and falls into the fire while he's rejoicing at his victory. And in the fire, with him dying, goes the ring. So the ring devours itself in the end. The very, very same idea. You look like you want to respond to that.
No, the devil is a devourer. Darkness is a devourer. It's the anti-God, because God creates and gives life. The devil only devours and destroys. But his devouring and destroying, I mean, can you imagine that the great culmination of the devil's triumph? I mean, if he wanted to put a trophy on his wall, he'd have to put the cross, which crushes him. It's so, I mean, how the Lord does it, and you just can't help but look at the whole history of salvation and just smile, like, wow, that's pretty good.
And it's kind of like it had a plan. Really had a plan. Hey, we're gonna do this again sooner than later, right?
All right.
Was that worth $1? What about $5? Project Resurrection is made possible by listeners like you and your patronage of my husband's work. Click the Patreon link in the show notes to sign up. Pretty please?